Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon to you and happy Friday. How are you doing on this, I think, quite beautiful day? How is it where you are? I hope that you are having a fantastic October. Where are we? The 23rd of October already. I hope you are in fine form this week. I hope you are doing great. Thank you so much for joining. Really nice to see you. Happy Friday to you. So I have mentioned the last couple of weeks the calamitous event that the clocks go back in the UK. They go back tomorrow overnight, and that's always quite a big deal for me. I don't know, it just really feels like winter is coming. So that's happening tomorrow night, and what that does mean is for at least a week or so, we'll at least have a bit brighter mornings. Isn't it dark in the morning already? But then we're definitely going to go into winter. So how are you doing? How are you doing? How's your week been? How's your family? How's your business? How's your team? Do let me know how you're doing. Give me a wave, say hello. Lovely to see you all. So do tell me what you've been working on this week. I do hope it's been a really productive week. I've had a really positive week, actually. It's been really great. It's been busy. So on Monday I ran a big workshop for the Royal Academy of Engineering, and it was all around managing different people and how to get in your flow. You'll know that I'm a passionate advocate of psychometric testing, and I use an amazing tool called Contribution Compass, which is effectively an evolution of the tool that I used to use, which was Talent Dynamics. If any of you have previously taken a Talent Dynamics test with me, then I'm very happy to offer you a free upgrade to Contribution Compass. And if you haven't yet tested yourself, then do get in touch, because I've got a very special offer for you. I think everybody should get themselves tested, understand what puts you in your flow, understand what gives you energy and what drains your energy. I promise you it'll change your life. So next week I am running a people management workshop where we're also going to talk about that. So one of my favourite topics. So yeah, really good week. I hope that you have had a great week, whatever you've been doing. Last week we were talking about social media, and I was sharing some of my thoughts with you, and a lot of people have got in touch and commented about that. So that was quite an interesting discussion that we had last Friday. If you haven't already watched it, then all of the lives are recorded in the group, so do have a search for that. It's all about social media. Everything is in the group. I've put them all into units as well so that you can find them easily. Right, so today we are going to talk about partnerships. So this is a really interesting topic, and one that is very close to my heart. Having spent most of my career, I realise, in very strong partnerships. And chapter 4 of my book actually is called Partnerships, and it contains a lot of useful information on this topic. So specifically in my book, I'm talking about kind of a partnership mindset, and also a lot of the practicalities of making a partnership work. I also speak with great passion and experience about the magic that happens when an ambitious, visionary, creative CEO type person works with a COO who is a born implementer. So that's a subject that I know many of you know I am passionate about. But today I want to take a little bit of a different angle. So maybe you're just starting out in business and you're wondering if you need a co-founder, or perhaps you're more established and you're starting to consider whether or not a partnership might strengthen your brand and your offering. And so these are the two. We're going to look at some of these different kinds of partnerships, and specifically I want to look at these two questions. So one, do I need a co-founder, or do you need a co-founder? And number two, how do you create great partnerships? So this is really what I want to cover with you today. I'm very happy to take any of your questions. Hello, and thank you so much for joining. So firstly, about that co-founder. So some founders are lone wolves and they thrive on sort of overcoming their daily challenges, and other founders want to work on the things that they enjoy, which is definitely something that I advocate, and leave the other stuff to somebody who is better suited to that work. Now, of course, if you're a solo founder, you know that I will still encourage you to do that, and find people around you that can be in their flow, so that you can do the things that that kind of light you up, that you enjoy and that you're good at. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a co-founder, and that's the question here that we're talking about. So I think another difference is some founders want to kind of live a life of responsibility and share none of the spoils, while other people maybe want to work in a bit more of a relaxed way, and they're happy to split the profit with like-minded people. So it really depends. There's no right or wrong decision. There definitely isn't, and I hope that you get that from everything that I share today. But I do want to give you 4 things to think about when you're asking yourself, if you're asking yourself this question, or if someone you know is asking themselves this question: do I need a co-founder? Okay, so number 1, starting a business is really, really, really hard. When you have that idea for your startup, it's really easy to get excited, and I hope that you do get excited, or that you are excited, or maybe you remember being excited. It's going to be a huge success, right? You're going to have that life that you always dreamed of. And then you begin executing on your brilliant new idea, only to realise that there really is a ton of work to be done. Now, of course, struggling to keep your head above water is never the most fun thing, but doing it alone is just worse. It's just not as fun. Not that keeping your head above water or trying to is ever particularly fun, but doing it on your own is particularly challenging. There is such a lot to learn when you start a company, and actually you never stop kind of running into those unexpected challenges that require you to learn new things and put you outside your comfort zone. So the question is, should you find someone to work with to make all of this a lot easier? And the thing is that choosing to build a company with another person is also a challenge. So all of a sudden, responsibility and accountability are part of every single decision. When you're a solo founder, you just do what you want to do and what you think is the right thing. With co-founders, you have to justify your choices, or at least you have to agree, the alignment with them. You can't just do what you feel like doing. And with some people, of course, that's very easy, and with others, that might be more challenging. It really does all boil down to how well you manage to communicate, and I will definitely come on to that in a second. So I guess that's number 1, is starting a business is really hard. Number 2, it's about thinking about sharing that stress. So stress is absolutely inevitable when you're starting a new business, and it can be really hard not to take that home with you. So it is really, really important to understand in advance that your significant other and or your children, if you have them, are not going to understand what you're going through, and neither are most of your friends and the people that you speak with. And the other thing you really need to understand is that you're not really going to be able to vent to your team, because they're not your friends, they're your team. And so you can't just vent to them when you feel like it. And so being a solo entrepreneur can really feel incredibly lonely. And I know that from many, many people that I speak with, it can be a really, really lonely a kind of journey, if you like, which is one of the reasons why this community exists. I really want you to feel that you can share anything, ask anything, and that you'll get support and you'll get feedback and you'll feel that sense of community. That's really the main reason why I started this and why I'm so passionate and why I'm here every Friday talking to you, answering your questions and just being here for you. I want you to feel like you're supported. But of course, sharing that stress with a co-founder is definitely a way to mitigate the stress that is involved in running a small business, for sure. And the point is that whether you're part of a community, whether you're part of a mastermind or an accountability group, whether you've got a great board of directors, whether you've got advisors, great advisors, even if you're working with a fantastic business coach, nobody will ever understand your business quite as well as you do. And so if you're just starting out on your business journey, I can absolutely assure you that the number of details and all of those intricacies will be quite significantly more, orders of magnitude more than your wildest expectations. I just need you to know that. And the only person that will ever really understand them like you when you need, in those moments when you need help the most, is a co-founder. And that just is the honest truth. And I'm not saying that therefore that's necessarily the right choice for you, but that just is a fact that nobody will ever understand your business quite as well as you do. And that then leads us on to point 3, which is problem solving. So we all know that problems are going to come up, right? That is inevitable. They always do. And what you need in those moments where problems come is what you actually need is opposing views. You want different perspectives. You want different ways of looking at things. So ultimately, you want someone that is wired differently than you. So a co-founder should ideally complement your skill set and bring kind of extra value to your business. When you have your own business, it requires you to suddenly develop kind of deep knowledge in so many different areas, tech, marketing, people management, finance, so many different ways. And it is absolutely impossible for any one person to be good at everything. So you absolutely need someone that will sort of complement your skill set and knowledge, not only someone that will share the workload and responsibilities, although that is also what you want. And the fourth thing that I want you to think about when you're asking yourself this, do I need a co-founder question, is about the risk for investors. If you are a business owner that is looking to raise money for your business, and I know that we have a number of people in this group that are looking to do that or are in the process of doing that, investors generally tend to support companies that are run by a team over those that are run solo. That is a fact. Generally speaking, investors trust companies that have multiple founders, and they are much more likely to fund them. So if you are looking to go down that route, it is definitely something to think about, getting a co-founder if you are looking to raise investment. What's interesting though is that the data actually shows that the single founders do very well statistically in terms of fundraising and exits. So it's not, I'm not trying to push you down one path or another. Single founders do very, very well, statistically, actually do better than businesses that are co-founded, because the risk with co-founders, of course, is that you disagree, you fall out, and that means that your company is more likely to fail. And investors, in my experience, are very, very attuned to that. When I'm sitting on any panel of investors, I'm always looking at the team and how that is made up, how they're made up, and what the different roles and responsibilities are. If you want to go in alone, that's absolutely okay. And it's just important to be aware that no one is going to be able to help you then when you're sleeping or when you're sick or when you're not around. As a solo founder, at least in the beginning, you are the company, right? So unless you can outsource or delegate work to employees and contractors, and I know I very much encourage you and help you to do that, but ultimately the buck stops with you. Yeah, you're responsible for everything, and particularly at the beginning, you're absolutely responsible for everything. And so it just is a much harder work. You just do need to put in more hours and work harder for those first few years than if you're sharing the load with somebody else, and that just is a fact. So you need to be prepared to spend significant time on your business when you go it alone. It also means, if you want to go it alone, that your reliance on systems is going to come much earlier than it might do if there were 2 or 3 of you. So you will absolutely need to build up those systems to deal with the high amounts of work much faster than if you have a co-founder. So for example, if you're traveling or if you're off sick or you're on holiday and you've got a co-founder, then you can obviously, they can often cover at least some of your work and your responsibilities while you're away. Without a co-founder, of course, that's not even an option. So that automating and documenting of your internal processes becomes really, really important if you want to stay sane as a single founder. And also, of course, it's key then to being able to delegate to employees and contractors as you develop and when the time comes. So just going to stop a little minute. There's a few people asking some questions. Yeah, so Johnny's asking, if solo founders do well with fundraising and exits, then why do investors prefer multiple founders? So specifically, founders do better they definitely do better with exits, and they often do better with building the company. The reason that investors don't like them is because there's much higher risk. It's just, as I say, it's just one person, so it's everything is on your shoulders. So often, if you've got a great idea and you can prove traction, then fundraisers will, or investors will get behind you. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? So investors, if you've got a track record and you have got some traction in the market and you can really prove what you're doing, then investors might get behind, and you've got a great team. That's the point. If you've got a great team around you, then investors will fund or will back a single founder. But particularly if you're early stage, if you've just got an idea, or you're very, maybe you've just got a minimum viable product and you're very early in the journey, investors prefer co-founded businesses, and certainly I know that I often do, and I'm asking that question. I want to know what the roles and responsibilities are, so I'm also attuned to that risk as well. So I think there's pros and cons with investors. They do, earlier stage, they do tend to prefer multiple founders, but then expect to have lots of questions about roles and responsibilities, especially from somebody like me, where I always want to ask that question. It also just depends how you're wired. It is an individual decision for sure. And what I would say is that ultimately businesses are successful because they follow the principles that I try to share with you here every week. The principles of building a successful business, not based on the number of chefs in the kitchen, if you like. That's not necessarily a key determinant of whether or not you're going to be successful. I think it's more about you and what do you want, what do you prefer. You're going to spend more time outside your comfort zone and more time with that feeling of everything is on your shoulders if you go down the solo route, but some people prefer that. So there's not a right or a wrong answer. I'm trying to share with you the kind of pros and cons of the decision. It's a big decision. It's one of the biggest decisions you'll make at the beginning of your company, your entrepreneurial journey, if you like. So you do have to decide what's right for you. You by yourself are probably more capable of doing more than you think you are, yeah? And so what I would definitely say is, please do not take on a co-founder because you don't believe in yourself. That's not a good reason to take on a co-founder. Do it because it's the right thing for you and your business. Ultimately, you need to trust yourself, your decisions, and your knowledge and your experience. So it's a business decision. It shouldn't be a confidence decision. If you do want to think about a co-founder, then my book, chapter 4, has a lot about that too. And I want to share with you now some areas to sort of think about if you do decide you want to go down that road, if you like. So one of the reasons that you might decide that you want a co-founder is that you need that support, you want that support, and you want that other person that you can rely on. And that's why when choosing a co-founder, a lot of people think about picking someone from their friends or relatives. And of course, those people that are closest to you will understand you better than anybody else. And that's a really powerful tool to have. That's a really powerful quality to have in that working relationship. But friends and relatives aren't always the best choices for someone to work with. They might always be biased. And if disagreements arise, then you do, of course, risk impacting that relationship in a negative way. I think the important point that I'm trying to make here, I always advise people that a co-founder is likely to come from your network. That might be your extended network. We're not looking for someone that we can go to the pub with here. You might go to the pub with them, but that's not your criteria. Your criteria is to try and find someone that you can solve problems with. And that's really what I would like you to have forefront of your mind. Is this person someone that I can solve problems with? So both of you should get excited at the prospect of tackling a complicated or an annoying issue, right? This is absolutely one of the core aspects of what makes an entrepreneur an entrepreneur. We can't look at a problem without wanting to solve it. That's really what makes an entrepreneur an entrepreneur. We want to solve problems. We want to find solutions. And so if your co-founder doesn't really care about that, doesn't really express any kind of interest in solving real problems, but is kind of more interested in, kind of playing startup, playing entrepreneur, or, kind of geeking out a bit on technology, then I would just say be very careful. Their drive to get through those painful parts of the entrepreneurial journey, their sort of staying power, that might fizzle out very quickly. What keeps us here, what keeps us on the journey, what keeps us driving forward as entrepreneurs is that we want to solve those problems, is that we want to provide solutions to people. And that is what you're looking for more than anything else in a co-founder. So you need to find someone who's equally excited when they talk about their work, even if they're wired completely differently than you. And you want someone that will kind of glowingly talk about the business when they're asked what they're doing. Even the most introverted person can capture the attention of people when they're talking about something that they're really passionate about. And so you really do want a co-founder that can talk as passionately and as eloquently as you can. Maybe in a different way, maybe they're wired completely differently, but you want that kind of passion and that excitement and that enthusiasm to solve whatever problem you've decided to solve. You both need, or you all co-founders need to have that kind of passion and that kind of enthusiasm, because quite frankly, if they don't, then how much are they actually feeling that themselves, and how much staying power will they have when things get tough? And as I said at the beginning, they will get tough. That is the reality of every single business has tough times for sure. Now I want to just share with you a few areas that you might want to think in terms of alignment between you and your potential co-founders. So the first one is really around empowerment. So when you start talking to potential co-founders, one of the questions I would suggest you ask or try to find out is, how much do they care about empowering other people? And the reason that that's important is actually quite a good indicator for several different things. So it's definitely an indicator of how willing they are going to be and how interested they're going to be in terms of helping your customers, because ultimately you want to empower your customers. It will also give you an indication in terms of how much they want to build a problem-solving product or service. But also it will give you some really interesting perspectives on how they feel about building and enabling a great team inside of your business. Enabling and empowering people is really at the core of entrepreneurship. So co-founders have to empower each other, of course. That's the first kind of element of empowerment, if you like. They need to empower each other to do their best work. And that is much easier when both of you have a really kind of burning desire to make the world a better place through your solutions, through your products and services. If your co-founder cares as much as you do, even in a very different way, then you are aligned in a very important way. They might be more into the kind of marketing and sales side, or they might be more interested in the technology side of things than you are. But if their real goal is to build something, create something that really lifts people up, then you have the possibility to build a business that is going to endure and is going to last. Not just survive, but is also going to thrive. So empowerment alignment, I would say, is super important between co-founders. And also skills alignment. So I've talked a lot about this in terms of having complementary skills and experience in terms of approaching problem solving in very different ways. It's important that you're really precise in terms of how you define roles and responsibilities between you and your co-founders. I would say this is probably the number one reason why I get asked to work with co-founders and intervene, if you like, when there's sort of a falling out or mistrust or misalignment, it's because we don't have really clear roles and responsibilities and crucially expectations. You need to think about and talk about how you're going to resolve conflicts. There will be conflicts. How do you resolve those day-to-day disagreements, but also how do you stay aligned in terms of the direction of the business? A really good tip, or a really good trick, if you like, that I definitely use with the clients that I work with is to think about what an organisation chart of the future might look like. How do you think your business might be structured in a few years' time? And then put one name in each of those boxes. And that gives you a sense of who is ultimately going to make the decisions for different areas of the business, if you like. So my husband and his co-founder in one of the businesses that he works in, she is responsible for product and he is responsible for tech. And ultimately, if there is a sort of a product design issue, if he can't persuade her, then he has to defer to her. They'll have the debate, but ultimately she is the decision maker there. And in terms of the implementation of the technology, ultimately that is his, ultimately it's down to him. So you need to have one person really ultimately that is responsible for each of the different areas of your business, even when you're starting out, which is why thinking about a future org chart can be a really good way of figuring out those roles and responsibilities. As long as the lines of communication are clear between the founders, then you really can build a company where people respect each other and listen to each other. But it does start with the communication between you and your co-founder or co-founders. As I often say, people always learn by example. Yeah, they'll follow your lead. You're the leaders of the business, and communication really is the most important thing. So we've talked about empowerment, alignment, and also skills alignment. And now I want to just talk a little bit about contribution alignment. So if you imagine that you found a company with someone who has an excellent network, for example, for you to sell into, you might run the risk of doing all the work yourself because they feel that they've kind of brought enough to the table by already having that network. I see that quite often when people bring money into the business. And then there's a kind of a mismatch in terms of how much each of the founders are working in the business. And my view is that assuming shares are distributed equally, you ideally want both founders to be working equally hard in the business. But it does get complicated if one party is bringing money in or more money than the other party, because how much work does a few £1,000s actually represent? How much genuinely, how do you equate that? And that is a very, very difficult question to answer. And it is really important to thrash that out at the beginning, because I also see a lot of kind of mistrust or misalignment happening when contributions either aren't equal or are not what the other party expects. And so I would definitely encourage you to have those conversations up front. Similarly with what I would call kind of wealth alignment, and by that I mean if there's considerable differences between your personal financial situations, your decision making might be impacted quite dramatically, particularly around your drive to earn profits and how quickly you need to earn profits and make your business profitable. So if you're living on a very tight budget yourself, you might want your business to be profitable much more quickly than if you have a sort of a sizable financial safety net. It's not that one perspective is better than the other, it just will impact your decision making and how you view that sort of roadmap, if you like, to profitability. So you do need to be very clear about your expectations around how quickly the company is going to be profitable, because some people will need that to happen much sooner, which has implications for the choices that you make, rather than if you can both afford to wait for a year or two before you need to start generating some serious some serious cash. You do just need to find something that works for all founders. You need to find a formula, if you like, a construct that works with your situation and each of your situations. And also that leads me on then to shares. If you think about share distribution, so what I find often is that a founder might start looking for a co-founder, but they might already have been thinking about their business for quite a long time. They might even have built a prototype or a minimum viable product, and they might even have paying customers already at that point where they think about a co-founder. And so if that happens in that scenario, they're very unlikely to opt for a sort of 50-50 share distribution because they've obviously taken a significant risk and they've already invested quite a lot of kind of sweat equity, if you like, to get this far. And so obviously in that situation, very few founders are going to be willing to part with half of their company easily. That's not going to be an easy decision to do that. So what do? Usually a co-founder in that scenario will get a kind of a minority of the shares, but something that's large enough for them to warrant still having that co-founder title and for them still to be considered as a founder, if you like. And so I've seen anything from kind of 49.5 or 49.9% all the way down to 5%. But I do think, I would just caution you here, you do need to think about the incentives that your co-founder has in terms of building your company into a profitable business, and that might not be the same as yours if they only own 5% of the share. Imagine if you sell the business for $1 million, they're only going to get 50k whilst you get the other 950. Yeah, so these results are clearly worlds apart, and what that might mean for you is that you might be financially secure for a good chunk of the rest of your life, whilst your co-founder might be able to pay a chunk off their mortgage. They are very, very different outcomes and therefore very, very different incentives. So you need to make sure that both of you are fine with the distribution of your shares. I would also strongly recommend a vesting schedule for your shares to keep you both aligned. And I guess the final point in terms of alignment is outlook alignment. And I have alluded to this already, but if you are the sort of person that believes businesses should be bootstrapped, by which I mean, let's not spend too much money, let's kind of do it a bit on a shoestring, you might be looking for a co-founder who feels that way as well, who maybe doesn't want to give away too much equity and just kind of wants to put in the hard yards and kind of do it as you go along. What I would ask you in that scenario is what happens if they change their mind? What if they push for outside investment? What if they actually decide that outside investment and having investors is a better strategy, whereas you are still determined to build that sustainable business without any investors telling you what to do or interfering? So this is another thing that needs to be really clear between the founders. A lot of entrepreneurs see that kind of bootstrapping phase, if you like, as the initial phase of a business, and some see it as the optimal state for the lifetime of the company. Yeah, there's very different visions for companies, and so you do need to make sure that you're aligned here between you and your co-founders. And of course, exactly the same logic applies for eventually selling the business, if that is something that might be a possibility depending on the type of business that you are running. Some people will entertain or actually are dreaming of that kind of big exit, and some founders, that's not what they're interested in at all. And this can lead, in my experience, to some really unpleasant surprises if you haven't had that conversation up front. Imagine that you get a call and a life-changing offer and your co-founder just kind of shrugs it off and goes, why would we do that? So again, make sure that you're working towards those same business goals. I think you're getting a bit of a theme through everything that I'm sharing with you. Communication really is clear. Finding a co-founder that shares your passion and sees kind of eye to eye with you on the future of the business, it can be the most incredible thing. But you're really looking for someone who can communicate well with, and the communication just flows really well. No matter how different your skill sets are and your skill levels, your experience levels, you can work together really well if you know each other's goals, if you know how each other is wired, and you get a bit of an understanding of each other's methods of solving problems. And you need to stay aligned. It's not just a question of being aligned in the beginning, you need to stay aligned, and that means really, really regular communication. Now you might think, why is she saying this to me? I meet quite a few co-founders who don't spend very much time talking to each other, maybe because they're busy, maybe because they are having trust issues, maybe because they are avoiding difficult conversations, many different reasons. But I would that's definitely an alarm bell for me. And going back to the investor piece, if I get a pitch from co-founders, I like to meet both co-founders or all three. More than three gets really, really complicated and tricky. I don't know that I would invest in a business with more than three co-founders unless there was a very good reason. But I like to meet the co-founders, and I like to look at the dynamic between them and understand some of that kind of the body language, the non-verbal communication. You can tell a lot by just watching how people pitch together. It's a very stressful situation. Most people find it quite stressful pitching for money. So just seeing how people support each other and how they communicate can be very eye-opening from an investor perspective. So communication clearly is a trust-building activity, and it does take time. That trust does take time to build up, even if it's someone that you know well. And don't forget, even if it's someone you know well, you've never run a business together unless you have. And so I see that mistake quite often is, good friends or even family members. Oh, well, we know each other. Well, you do know each other as brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, friends, but you've never worked together. You don't have any experience of running a company together. And so learning about the other person with a different hat on is one of the things that you need to do, even if it's someone that you know quite well. So when you don't understand something in the business, you need to obviously make sure that you talk it through with your co-founder and find a common understanding. This is what this is all about. You absolutely don't need to be an expert in everything they do. In fact, that completely defeats the point. Please don't be an expert in everything they do. But you should have a really solid grasp on what you both do and crucially, how it contributes to the business. So what both of your contributions are to the business. So we've talked a lot about co-founders and starting out, but what about partnerships when you're a more established business? I also want to cover that for you. So balance of power is very, very important here. And by that I mean, what are both parties bringing to the table? Because partnerships are obviously not only about two individuals or three individuals getting together, they're also about companies negotiating together. It's also about maybe not getting into bed together, but forming some kind of a joint venture, that kind of a partnership. And so it's really important to understand what you're bringing to the table, what's the value that you're bringing to the table, but also what the other person is bringing to the table, or the other entity, if you like. So what are the problems that you have that they can solve, and also vice versa? This is not supposed to just be simply an exchange. You want it to be a win-win situation where both sides are actually benefiting and getting more from the partnership, rather than just exchanging one thing for another, which is a much more transactional relationship. So I like to think of partnerships as three key sides of a triangle, if you like. If you think about this as the sort of partnership triangle: brand, distribution, and product. So which one of those three are you bringing to the table? And ideally, you really want to be having strength in two of these areas, I would advise, to put yourself in a strong position to enter into a partnership, because you don't want to be entering into a partnership from a perspective of weakness. So brand, distribution, and product. So I'll give you some examples. So do you have maybe a really great product and a really good distribution network? So a really good way of getting your product or your service out. But maybe then you partner with someone who's got a really great brand. So maybe you partner with a celebrity or a local celebrity, or someone who's really well known in your industry, and you can leverage their brand to enhance the credibility and the standing of your amazing product and distribution network. So that would be a kind of a brand partnership, if you like. You can also think about if you've already got a great network and you've got a really great solid brand that really stands for something and has some real strong brand values behind them, but maybe you want more products to offer to your clients. Could you partner with somebody who's offering something that is complementary to what you're offering? So you've got this great network and you've got a really strong brand, but maybe you bring in, as I say, additional products and services to complement what you are offering to your clients. Or the third option, if you like, is maybe you have a great brand and you already have a great product, but you need more channels and more ways to get to market. You need, in this case, you're talking about a distribution partnership where you're partnering with somebody who has that great network, but could get great value from leveraging your products and your brand. So think about that triangle. If you are thinking about a partnership, where are you strong and where are you weak, if you like, or how could you leverage other people's strengths? But in order to do that, you really need to know where you are strong yourself. And I think that's the key to a good partnership, is understanding your strengths, but also where you need additional leverage. So think about that partnership triangle, I should say: brand, distribution, and product. So I often get asked about legal structures, and I need to say here I am not an accountant, but I will just very quickly say in the UK we have 4 types of legal structure. So we have a sole trader, where you're on the hook for everything and you fill out a self-assessment. You have a partnership between 2 or more people where again you're all on the hook for everything. You're responsible and accountable for everything that your partner does, or you're liable for anything there, all the assets, all the profits, etc. You're on the hook for all of it. You then get a limited liability partnership where then each person is only liable up to the amount of money that they have invested in the business. And then of course you have a limited company. Now, with regards to partnerships, one thing you may not know is there isn't any specific legal regulation, if you like, of joint ventures, which means ultimately that they can be structured how you want them to be structured. There is no sort of legal framework in that sense. You have to decide which of those 4 legal structures you're going down and then structure the partnership accordingly. Now, the most important thing that I want you to take away from today's live, absolutely the most important thing, and I've been kind of saying it all the way through, but I'm going to repeat it, is you must have something written down, which requires you to have all of these conversations that I've been talking about. If you check out chapter 4 of my book, there are some really good questions to get you started with that conversation, a number of which I've talked about today. So a number of different scenarios to think about, both from a partnership perspective and a co-founder perspective, and please write them down. Please write it down. I'm not talking about an expensively legally crafted, legally binding agreement. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a document that you both agree to and that you both sign and that you exchange a copy of, yeah? So the reason why this is so important is it's really easy for us to agree when we're smiling at each other and we're excited and we're thrilled about our new partnership or our new joint venture or a co-founding a new and exciting business. It's easy, really super easy to think that we're on the same page. But a number of these different things that I've mentioned, lack of alignment around skill set, lack of alignment around contribution, lack of alignment around outcomes for the business. When you hit those hurdles, when you're working all the hours that God sends, when you're having a tough time, that is when we forget what was said, what was agreed. And even if we do remember it, our interpretation of that can get skewed. Now, of course, if you've got a written document, you can still interpret it in more than one way, but it at least helps to pull out that document and go, oh yeah, we did agree to that, didn't we? Honestly, I have seen so many friends, family members, even husbands and wives fall out because they didn't have a simple, this is what we're doing, this is how we are This is how we are sorting out roles and responsibilities. This is what we want. This is what happens if one of us decides we want to walk away. Super important. Please do that. Just please spend a few hours having that conversation and getting something written down. Honestly, it is worth your time, I promise you. So they are my thoughts on partnership. I'd be really interested to hear about your experiences. Let me know if you've got any questions or comments. Have you ever formed a partnership? Have you ever formed a joint venture? Are you at the beginning of your business journey, and are you asking yourself that question, do I need a co-founder? I'm going to close today's live, with two quotes on this subject. So firstly is from Simon Sinek. He is a British American author and motivational speaker. And this is one of my favourite quotes. Great CEOs look up and out. Great COOs look down and in. It's the partnership of their perspectives that make great companies. I write a lot about this in my book, and there are other lives that I've done on this particular topic. If you're not clear about the difference between a CEO and a COO, I would be delighted to have that conversation with you. If you are being told by investors, by other people, by anybody, that you don't need a COO, I respectfully disagree. You don't have to call them a COO, but you need somebody with that skill set if you are going to build and scale a company. The second quote is from Peter Drucker, the Australian-American educator and author. And what he has to say is, whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a very courageous decision. So what's your courageous decision? Who could you partner with? Listen to yourself and ask yourself, what do you need to spend more time in your flow? And how could partnerships make you and help you spend more time in your flow? As I say in my book, the real entrepreneur views customers, suppliers, and even competitors as potential partners. So do let me know your thoughts and questions on this, or any other topic, of course, relating to how to grow a business that works for you. What area of business would you like me to speak about next? What would be most helpful for you in growing your business? If you don't already have a copy of my book, The Real Entrepreneur, you can get your free copy if you go to therealentrepreneurbook.com. That's a paperback version that you'll get if you go there. If you prefer an Audible or a Kindle version, you can get those from Amazon. So it just remains for me to wish you a very lovely weekend, whatever you're doing and whoever you're doing it with. I do wish you a very happy and peaceful time. And as always, if you want to talk, you know where I am. Please remember to be where you are in the journey. You don't need to know it all, and you certainly don't have to do it all. Take care, stay safe, and do keep in touch. Bye for now.